Well, welcome to the last session of the Accountability in the Sustainable World Conference. I'm delighted to introduce students from Notre Dame who will be involved in the youth engagement session, which we have at the end of every conference every year. It's usually Notre Dame students, but it is also students from other universities, University of Technology, Sydney in 2021. The students from University of Notre Dame come from all disciplines: chemistry, engineering, global affairs, law, economics, accounting, finance. I'm sure I forgot some. They will remind us during the session of those I've forgotten. This year, these students have given me questions which they would like me to ask them, to give them the opportunity to talk to you about the things that they are concerned about. What they share is a passion for sustainability and making a difference in our world. Before going into this session, I want to talk a little about the course. We have three major pieces. One is speakers from various parts of the world, various disciplines, and I'd like to just thank them. So I'm going to list them. First of all, Anna Vincent from our own tank lab here at the University of Notre Dame. Scott Gibson from Quercus Agroforestry. Kartik Ramana, Professor of Business at University of Oxford. Jeff Hales, who came, in fact, physically to class. We thank Jeff. He's a member of the International Sustainability Standards Board. Shiva Rajgopal, Professor of Accounting at Columbia Business School. Thomas Kamai, Executive Director, Counterpoint Global, Morgan Stanley. Joachim Gassen, Professor at Humboldt University. Bianca Bayer, Professor at Aalto University in Finland. Veronica Poole, Global IFRS and Corporate Reporting Leader for Deloitte. Mark Vason, President of Accountancy Europe and KPMG. Alison Lee, a former SEC Commissioner and now Professor at NYU. Summer Kim, Professor of Law at UC Irvine, and Doug Johnson at PwC, Global Sustainability Head. We thank all of them for coming. Their insightful comments and suggestions and provocative statements that they made to our students were extremely valuable. Thank you. We also look at 10 research papers. The students may refer to them, they may or may not, depending on the extent to which the inspiration from the research affects their answers to their questions. Finally, we read 4 books. Those of you who have any idea about what these books are about will recognize these are 4 very different books, deliberately chosen as different books. I just want to mention each of them. First of all, The Future We Choose, The Stubborn Optimist's Guide to the Climate Crisis, written by Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivett-Carnac. False Alarm by Bjorn Lomborg. Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And The Ministry of the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. Now again, the students have given me questions which they would like to answer. So let me begin with a group of great students who will introduce themselves and ask them questions that they gave me. Now these weren't exactly the questions as given to me by the students. I embellished them a little bit and added comments from other students in the class. So the first question, and I'll read this question. The course you have experienced is called Accountability in a Sustainable World. This is also the name of this conference. Accountability requires measurement, and this places accounting at the core of sustainability. With accounting comes issues such as greenwashing, who will assure that the measurement is accurate or meaningful, and an excessive focus perhaps on what is measured. what is measured matters, among other issues. I would like to hear your thoughts on the central role of accounting measurement with regards to movement toward a sustainable future. I'll leave you to decide who might answer that question first.
I can go ahead and go first. My name is Grace Kinsella, and I'm an accounting major here at Notre Dame, but I also have a minor in poverty studies and have been studying sustainability as well. So I do believe accounting plays a central role in creating a sustainable future. And even in my audit class earlier this year, we were talking about the importance of assurance just generally, how we need to have data quality, or at least the perception of data quality. And we were talking about how the future of assurance lies within sustainability. And there's a lot of buzz and excitement in the classroom talking about that, and how as we're going into our careers, this is a really cool and unique space that we have the opportunity to get into. And we were discussing how accounting firms do have the capability to go into tackling the information asymmetry problem that you were describing, with firms wanting to greenwash and managers greenwashing in order to, present their companies in the best light possible. But at the same time, investors need that accurate information. So accounting firms as assurance providers can step into that space. And from what I've seen in my internship, the Big Four are already going in that direction. And I think that although the ways in which we go about tackling this information asymmetry for financial accounting versus sustainability is a little bit different, I think at our core, accountants, or specifically auditors, are trained to essentially find evidence for a measurement or find evidence for a management assertion. And so the ways in which we go about that may be different with sustainability, but we're using those same skills. So I think that's really exciting as I'm moving into my career. But as I think we'll talk about later, collaboration is going to be necessary with accountants in order to learn more about those sustainability measurements like emissions and so on.
Great start. Braden?
Yeah, I can go ahead and follow up on that. My name's Braden Napoli. I'm a statistics major, minoring in sustainability and sociology. So I kind of draw together a few diverse fields. And I was lucky enough a few summers ago to take a course here at Notre Dame called How to Not Lie with Statistics. And I think statistics have played a big part in my understanding of sustainability and understanding measurement and data in this class. And although I don't have necessarily that background in accounting or in business like a lot of other students, I think I was able to use my experience from this class specifically on this topic. And we talked a lot about how easy it is to lie with statistics, how easy it is for people to believe the first statistic that they see, especially from a big name corporation, especially from corporations that people want to place their values behind. But I think it's important that we are critical of corporations. I think it's important we're critical of our education systems. We're critical of each other, because if we're not, change will not be made. And so like Grace mentioned, cooperation is going to be a big key in that, but understanding that not every statistic that we see is correct right away. Not every measurement placed out by a company is correct. We need to verify that the work that we are doing is being put into action. And I think that learning through an accounting lens, but also seeing it through a statistical lens and using proper data analysis methods and using proper quality data analysis methods is important. Because I know one of the big issues that our speakers touched on this year was the problem of getting quality data, the problem of using quality data. There is not enough out there, or there is too much and we don't know what to do with it. So if we can get the right people involved in the field working with data, I think we can make a big impact.
Awesome answer. Kaylee.
Yeah, my name is Kaylee Lauk, and I study political science with minors in education, sustainability, and politics, philosophy, and economics. So a lot of what I've learned in this class over the course of the semester has been new to me in terms of information that I wasn't previously aware of. The financial world is not something that I had experience with. So for me, entering at a time when it's so exciting to be talking about measurement and accountability within the accounting field, I think it's an excellent time for a lot of people to be breaking into this field who may not have otherwise had background in the subject, knowing that it was only a few months ago that the ISSB measures began to be rolled out. Just really makes for an exciting time to see some more structured measurement and analysis for the future of accountability. And I really feel like as somebody interested in public policy and international relations, seeing how quickly real change was made, especially in our analysis of different conversations that have taken place at this conference in the past, we've seen how quickly, as a class, accountability has changed. And I think it's exciting to imagine where we could be 2 years from now, considering the momentous change in a positive direction that we've taken with the formation of the ISSB. And I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to learn about these topics now so I can feel better equipped to enter a public policy role in the future.
Great. It was great to have you in the class. Laura?
My name is Lauren Amaral. I'm an economics student, and I'm minoring in sustainability and digital marketing. And so to echo Kaylee's sentiment a little bit, I really feel like the talent is a huge part of the sustainability world and bringing sustainability to the forefront of organizations. So with this question, I really think about the talent and the leadership that's needed to ensure that these standards and these measurements are being accurately verified and shared with the public and any stakeholders. And so I really think about making sure that each company and all these different organizations have the personnel and the experience that they need to do these ESG ratings and to get these ESG measurements so that they can tailor all the information that's coming in and really figure out what their priorities are, and then communicate with their stakeholders, the priorities that are most important to them in the ESG world.
Thoughtful answer. Thanks. Susie?
Hi, I'm Susie Kanala. I am an accounting and economics student here. I think that accountability doesn't exist without measurement, and so it really does have a central role towards moving towards a sustainable future. And accountants specifically, like Braden stated, really bring that professional skepticism to the field. And with these standards that are being developed, we really see a movement towards comparability and kind of holding firms to their standards and expectations in their industries, and kind of helping set standards not just for at an individual firm level, but also industries, and then maybe kind of an overall or overarching kind of business world type standard for sustainability. And I think as these standards keep being developed and accountants are being upskilled in these areas, we are able to push for greater information presented to investors. And I think that's really important moving forward.
Something that holds you all together as a group, a reason you came to this class, is a passion with respect to climate change, sustainability. It could be the S and the G of ESG. So what's the basis of your particular passion for sustainability? How does this passion affect your daily routines and your plans for the future? Two very different perspectives. How did your attitudes, thoughts, expectations, understanding about sustainability change throughout the course? Perhaps we could start with you, Jen.
So at least for me, since I come from the West Coast, I'm originally from California. In the last couple of years, California has been ravaged by a lot of wildfires. And so that has always been like a smoking signal, literally and figuratively, of the damage and the dangers of climate change. And that's what drawn me to sustainability. And I try to do as much as I can from a personal standpoint. For example, lowering energy usage, trying to bike wherever I can instead of driving. For example, when I get the groceries, I try to get a little basket on the bike and go get it instead of driving the car. So little actions like that are things I try to do on a daily basis to try to curb my own carbon emissions and also just keep conscious of my carbon footprint. My attitudes and expectations throughout this course did change a lot because as a chemistry major, I have a lot more of a technical understanding of sustainability, and I never really thought of things through an accounting or a accountability side of them. So having that extra perspective now has given me another lens to look at these things going forward as well. So that has been extremely helpful.
How about you, Carl?
So sustainability is a relatively fresh passion of mine. I knew very little about it before coming into this course. In terms of my daily routines, I think I'm still learning about ways that I can improve on the little things I do. In terms of my plans for the future, I'm not sure if my plans have changed at all, but as an accounting student, I've learned a lot about how the accounting industry intersects with sustainability. And so I definitely think that there's been new paths opened up for me in the future. And taking my accounting background into a sustainability role at some point in my future has definitely become an option for me now after taking this course. And I really appreciate that.
Great to hear. Jasmine?
Yeah, I realize I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jasmine Ferguson. I'm a third-year law student here at Notre Dame. And I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of research throughout my time in law school, specifically focused on ESG as it relates to corporate governance. And so that's what kind of struck my passion for sustainability and enrolling in this course. But I recognize that I didn't have much of a background or much of an understanding of sustainability other than the conversations that we kind of hear amongst our friends or amongst our colleagues. And so this course was really great because I was able to see how other expertise relate to sustainability, whether that's accounting, whether that's from a legal framework or specifically from a business standpoint as well. So it was really great for me to kind of see holistically how these different areas affect sustainability.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I'd say as an accountant, I think going into this class, a lot of my reasoning to do it was for the reporting aspect of sustainability. I think there's a lot that goes into reporting that can sort of influence consumer behavior. I think that's really the way that the whole issue of climate change is going to be changed at the end of the day, is influencing that consumer behavior through improved sustainability reporting. And I think throughout this year in the class, I kind of came in expecting there to be sort of like one set of standards that there had to be able to actually report. But in the last few weeks, we sort of talked about how that's not necessarily the best thing. And we might want to be able to take in different opinions on how this should be done and how this should be reported in order to give that to consumers. And that can still make a change at the end of the day. So I think that's a lot of the reason why I took this class. And I've really appreciated getting to learn more about it throughout the year.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
For me, I was first introduced to sustainability back in undergrad through an internship. I was exposed to impact investing, and from there, it just piqued my interest, and I continued to do like independent research, independent writing about the topic, and just through that research, I'm learning how all disciplines are connected in every way. So, for example, the SEC makes the disclosure requirements that accounting and other companies have to follow. So just understanding the relationship between each discipline and how they can work with each other to make sure that things are getting done the right way is important.
What do you see as the main challenge for corporations in implementing policies, changing production methods, and satisfying all of their stakeholders? What is the role of the corporate board? What are the key aspects of leadership, for example, corporate board structure, that would hasten progress toward a more sustainable future? How can corporations make sustainability-focused decisions when their leadership's fiduciary duty to shareholders' obligation obligates them to pursue a profit? How about you, Carl?
So one of the main challenges I think corporations now are facing is they want to have to balance the stakeholders who value sustainability and the stakeholders who value financial returns. And I think one thing corporations can learn is that those two are not opposed, and that there are ways to do both. And they can sort of please all their shareholders, the ones who value those financial returns and who value sustainability.
I think you're going into the Big Four. That's going to be a big challenge to encourage people to do that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But I think as the narrative gets talked about more, I think corporations will take on more of this responsibility.
Yeah. Jasmine?
Yeah, I would specifically say corporate boards are responsible for setting the tone of the corporation. They're responsible for assessing the risk and identifying where they can make sustainable practices or where the risks are in unsustainable practices that they may already be conducting. And so the board is really responsible for taking the lead, allowing the organization to see how they can embed sustainable practices into their everyday, and recognizing kind of what Kyle said, that just because an effort is sustainable doesn't mean it can't have long-term profitability as well. So corporations really look to the board to provide guidance in that area, and it's going to be really crucial as we continue to move forward and continue to combat climate change, that boards are diverse with different perspectives, whether there are people related to the sustainability areas, engineering or business, legal. Those diverse perspectives are going to be crucial for the boards to be able to identify holistic approaches to the issue.
Great thoughts. Andrew?
Yeah, so I think sort of similar to what Carl said, I think a lot of it is just sort of having to do with that traditional sense of we need to maximize our profits, maximize that shareholder return in order. That's what the role of the corporation is. And I think sort of transitioning into more seeing that the sustainability aspects and sort of getting that value out of being able to be sustainable for a company is very important. I think one of the ways that that's going to be facilitated is sort of giving the consumers that information at the end of the day. Once there's that association between corporations acting in a sustainable manner and consumers sort of flocking to that profit is sort of going to be tied in to being more sustainable, and then there's going to be more change at the end of the day. So I think just incorporating those two more and more over time, which is what we've already been seeing in the past 10, 20 years or so, I think that change is going to end up making everything a lot different. Yeah.
Wow, there were some quotable quotes in that answer. Mace?
I think one of the main challenges for corporations implementing policies that goes to sustainability is the cost. It won't be, it'll be expensive to move to more sustainable practices. Bill Gates calls it a green premium. So the challenge will be like who covers that green premium, whether organizations want to make consumers cover it or whether they want to have the upfront costs in order to have goodwill with the consumers. And just understanding how that will play out moving forward, I think will be important and a challenge that organizations will have to face moving forward.
Many of the people in the conference are very aware of what green premium means, but would you like to elaborate on that?
So green premiums are the extra cost that it will be to go to a carbon-free alternative. For example, for fossil fuel, how much more would it cost to go to an all-electric model versus fossil fuel, like fuel costs and things like that.
And we could add that onto the gasoline price, right, in the form of a tax or something. Jen?
So the way I see it, I think the biggest challenge to corporations implementing sustainable policies is probably more inertial, trying to get over that initial hump. I think once you get the ball rolling, though, however, a lot of these steps moving towards sustainability are much more self-apparent, self-evident. So I think, as we all said, moving towards a corporation that understands both sustainability and profit, getting the ball rolling is probably, I think, the hardest and most important step, getting it rolling in the right direction.
Let's move on to education. So this is a question that came from the class. Many of you have expressed concern about an education gap, and we've heard about this from some of the speakers who have visited the class. What are your thoughts on this issue? How could the education system change? Are universities doing enough? Is Notre Dame doing enough? What else should be done? Perhaps you'll go first, Sean.
So I feel that there should definitely be more of a focus on sustainability for sure. People need to realize this isn't just a topic to discuss, but something that you can really do something with in the world and have a career with. Regarding Notre Dame, I feel like we have to give Notre Dame some credit. I think Notre Dame has done a good job in some sustainability roles. Me specifically as an accounting major, I feel sustainability was partially at least integrated into my curriculum. And I know we also have a sustainability minor. So I think Notre Dame does deserve some credit, but obviously I think there's always need for improvement. And I think there can totally be improvement with sustainability integration.
How about you, Em?
Yeah, so my undergrad degree is actually in environmental studies, not from Notre Dame, but I think I've been lucky enough to have kind of chosen this field a bit more. So I have been exposed to more sustainability in my education because that's what I chose to study, and same in the Masters of Global Affairs. My concentration is in sustainable development. So a lot of the classes, like I mentioned, environmental policy, do have that lens and that focus. But what I will say for how other majors, other disciplines can integrate this, I think what I would like to see is an integration of sustainability issues into all fields and all disciplines, because I do think that it's relevant for everyone. Seeing that this class exists in Mendoza is great. I took it for that reason. I wanted to see what the business school is talking about in terms of sustainability. And so I do think that a curricular approach that I would encourage Notre Dame and other universities to take on is not just to have sort of like a checkbox or a one course on sustainability that people have to take, but rather that professors are encouraged to integrate modules of sustainability into all of their courses, because I do think it's relevant in almost every single course. You can find a way to talk about it in construction and engineering and accounting and business, in really any field or major of study. So that would be my recommendation.
Great thoughts. I'm sure a lot of the people listening agree with you, perhaps so provoked by what you say. Good thoughts. Megan?
To build off that point, I think that addressing the education gap really comes down to prioritizing 3 goals. And I think the first of which that Emma touched on was appropriately and comprehensively embedding it into curriculum at the university level across disciplines. I think the second, and even in my own experience, is making sure that students across disciplines are aware that these courses are being offered and have the opportunity to take advantage of them and be involved and engaged in sustainability conversations. I myself kind of unwittingly discovered sustainability from a business background, and then realized that Notre Dame had so much to offer in that space across business and science and other fields. And so making sure that students know the opportunities are available, I think, is crucial. And then I think ultimately the messaging from the university, or any university as an organization, needs to be consistent. I think so far we've seen that Notre Dame is not only promoting sustainability in the classroom, but taking action as an institution to implement it, not only on campus, but in the community.
I'd like to brag a little about Notre Dame. So we, in the accounting group, have appointed a professor, Professor Claire Donovan, whose entire role is to integrate sustainability into every accounting class that we offer. That's her position. This was an initiative of our new chairman, Brad Patisher. Great idea, and it's really working. So that's the sort of idea of integrating it into everything. We are doing it in accounting, and so we can brag in accounting, but I think other disciplines are doing it because Notre Dame is starting to see the importance. Daniel?
Yeah, Notre Dame definitely has a lot of different opportunities, whether it's the sustainability minor, energy studies minor, and then some minors focused on it a little bit more, things in the Keough School, American Studies, and Arts and Letters. And I definitely think that the university is also acting on different things, such as trying to get some nuclear energy onto campus. They have the bioenergy with the composted food, which is only in the dining halls. I think they could expand it to all food on campus. But there are also other things in terms of larger ideas versus such as, I don't know how they're managing their endowment, but I think that that's a big question there of, is that something where we're putting our money where we're saying we're going to? But definitely a lot of action being taken on this campus for sure.
Jaylene? Yeah, we don't need to keep the focus on Notre Dame, although you're welcome to do that if you'd like.
No, actually, to follow what you said, I did take this question in a more broader stance, because I think that this question is kind of a call to action to everyone in school and out of school already. I do believe that sustainability, much like any celebrity's name, should become a household subject. I think everyone should have some type of understanding of what sustainability is in a real sense, not just be like, oh, sustainability, recycle some cardboard and then we're good. That's a good starting effort for sure. But I think a little more is definitely needed in every household across the nation, across the world. And I think that would mean like not only teaching about sustainability in universities and colleges. I think it needs to trickle down to secondary education and primary education. If you make it part of the education early, they'll continue to seek out that education growing older. So I think that's where my thoughts took me.
I think that's a quotable quote. Sustainability should be a household word, right? Michael?
Yeah, that was a great quote. So I think that part of the issues that we're having in this country as a nation is just a lack of understanding of the issues, and the main way to combat that is to educate people. And I think the education system that we have is the main avenue to do that. So I'm a law student, and this course was offered as cross-listed on our course offering list, and I think that speaks to the commitment that the university has to sustainability, right? And if there was perhaps a way to communicate that need for education on a broader national scale, I think that would be great.
How can individuals and organizations strike a balance between recognizing the risk of climate change while staying hopeful that there is a future for our planet? Is a pretty profound question.
Well, I had the opportunity to read The Future We Choose in this course, and the approach that they took was this stubborn optimism approach, and it's about not denying the scientific facts that are there, but really leaning into the positive ones, such as renewable energy decreasing in cost. I found that a great point, as well as how optimism is not the same as celebration. Whereas celebration comes when we succeed, optimism should be the input. That's something the book really drives forward of. We need to balance recognizing the negative with also having that optimism be the input to get to that success.
I agree. I also read The Future We Choose, and that was something that stood out to me as well, because even in non-sustainability type of subjects, that's the approach that I kind of try to have with my life of course, there's bad things that are going to happen, but you have to kind of try your best to at least remain hopeful that it won't always be that way. Because if you have a negative mindset, whether it's about climate change or your career or whatever it is, you're going to have a harder time pulling yourself out of that and actually having something positive come from that experience. And I feel like in this type of conversation, if we immediately just think it's over, it's too late, everything is ruined, there's nothing we can do at this point, then of course nothing is going to happen there. But if we at least try our best to recognize the positive changes that are coming and the things that we can actually do moving forward to try to make a change, then at least we're putting ourselves in a better position to try our best and to try to actually have things get better or at least not get worse. So I feel like that's important for sure.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think hope and optimism is a really important tool and really important for progress. But essentially you have to believe what you're doing is going to work, but that can only be done with action. Hope it's kind of a double-edged sword. Hope could also be just as detrimental if you don't do anything. If you were to stay on a business as usual trajectory and just hope that things are going to get better, you're not in a good spot. So,
right before this class, Lori showed us this graph. It was like a bar graph, and it talked about the financial impact that climate change will have on assets and companies. And when we were looking at it, we couldn't believe it, because it's by 2050, it's like a 5%, I believe. It was like a 5% economic impact, and by 2090, it was 10%. So you're talking millions, even billions of dollars of revenue that will be lost by these companies, if they don't adjust and adapt to climate change. And with that, corporations need to think about implementing these ideas directly into their core principles, rather than just saying that they're doing something for a social benefit. It needs to be embedded in the company and enacted that way. So.
What is it that you would really like to say to this audience of 2,000 people, roughly half of whom are from universities around the world, and the other half are movers and shakers, regulators, lawmakers, practitioners in accounting, practitioners in financing, investors? Anyway, what would you like to say? You don't need my question.
I guess I could start this off.
Yeah, go.
I think one thing that I've really taken away from this course is that, everybody matters, right? Everybody can contribute to this problem, and it starts with education, right? But it goes all the way to actually implementing these ideas and thinking about it in your day-to-day life, right? Because this problem is so complex, and it can't be handled alone. So we need this like diverse opinions and backgrounds from like, we need solutions from companies and, schools. We need solutions from like everyone, even down to like, a local gardener, right? That's using their, water supply. Like it's always needed. So I think for us, for me, that's something that I really recognize, is that like everybody can make an impact and everybody needs to, because this is a problem that will affect all of us if we don't do something.
And the background of that is the word collaboration, right? Which we've all talked about a lot in this class.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, in addition to Parker says, I think collaboration is highly important here. For instance, just imagine like postgraduate scenario where I will like collaborate with my classmates here upon graduation. In this regard, I think a collaboration will be much easier because we have already a shared understanding and we know what we want to get done throughout this collaboration. So I think bringing all the diverse people from diverse backgrounds, as Parker said, it's what we want to reach out here. Thank you.
I think one big takeaway I got from the course was, in addition to this collaboration, that really we all win or we all lose here. That's something the Future We Choose talked about a lot, of like, we should be collaborating with one another constantly. And when you have an idea, it's not about just propelling your idea forward, but how can you bring other groups involved? Like one specific example I got was how in auditing now, it's not just like the big auditing firms we think of, but engineering firms can get involved. So it's really about that stemming from collaboration to get to success.
So Brittany and then Zach, last words.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I also got from the Future We Choose, but just from the course in general and kind of building off of Parker's point, is that in addition to the fact that we can all actually make individual differences, it's also not necessarily just our responsibility, but also our power to be able to put pressure on companies, pressure on our politicians, on even our professors, on our universities, our bosses at our jobs in the future, and just anybody that has a little bit maybe more authority or more power than we might individually, to pay more attention to these types of issues and try to make change. For example, if you're interviewing for a job, this was something that we've all talked about. If you're interviewing for a job and you're not sure what that company or what that firm or your boss might be doing towards sustainability to try to make a change, ask them about it, bring up the conversation. Even if you have to be the first person in your respective space to talk about it, showing that there's an interest, showing that that passion is there, can start the conversation and start to make the difference. And little by little, that's how change can actually happen. Whereas if we all just assume that the problem will be resolved by other people or by the politicians themselves, our bosses, etc., the issue might never get resolved because nobody's showing that the pressure is there. And I feel like now more than ever is the time for us as individuals to take on that responsibility and put forth that pressure so that we can actually make a change.
Wow, that's a great last word. Zach, shoot in the home goal.
Really just echoing what my peers had said. Going through the sustainability minor, I've been really surprised in all my classes of the different majors and like the different backgrounds of all my peers. So learning from them, and even like some of the questions they ask, like have never come to my head. Like everyone's has different perspective on the issue, and kind of learning from them, this kind of shed light on like how complex the problem is and how it really is going to need input from everyone and from every different background or profession.
We've heard a lot about e-liability accounting during the semester. What is e-liability accounting? What are the strengths and possible weaknesses? So I'll ask one of you, what is e-liability accounting? And then the others can comment on strengths and weaknesses. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, of course, Professor, and thank you for having us. My name is Zachary DiBiase. So e-liability accounting is an accounting system where emissions are recorded where they occur in the value chain. So for instance, let's take a car door, for example. The supplier who produces the metal for the car door is going to track the carbon emissions associated with that metal. Same with the glass and the electronics, recording those for those specific parts, and then they're going to pass that down to the assembler of the car door, the car manufacturer, so that they have a total sum of all the emissions that have gone into the car door. And this continues to get passed down the value chain, ultimately to the customer, so that there's an idea of what the emissions are for the whole entire car door and then the car eventually.
And the idea is to capture scope 1 and scope 2, not scope 3.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you see as the strength?
For me, it's very kind of almost very intuitive. It makes sense to record emissions where they occur so that they could be better monitored. I assume it's fairly easy for a steel manufacturer to understand what their emissions look like, same with a glass manufacturer, and similarly with an electronic manufacturer. Those can all be summed and then put together into the final product. It's very kind of intuitive and easy to understand, and I think that's one of its main strengths.
So it sounds like you don't have any weaknesses.
I'd say weaknesses at points, let's say there's small suppliers involved in making a car door, for instance. Those emissions may not be completely recorded. But I know when we learned about this, one of the main points of it was to capture kind of an 80-20 rule. If we're accounting for 80% of the emissions, we're doing a really great job at recording. So I think that's kind of the mindset that has to be had, at least at launch, with an idea like e-liability accounting.
That was a pretty comprehensive answer. Now, Asher, I challenge you to add to that. Not easy. Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Matt. I'm a law student, so that is going to color this answer. In terms of weaknesses, I really think that in theory, e-liability is it's a great answer. And also, it's early on in trying to answer a really difficult question. So I think you have to, when you're dealing with theories that are new, be nice when they're embryonic. They're forming. The downside that I really see at this stage of e-liability is sort of a classic one. And that's just always the risk that at any stage of the process, the person producing something is going to have incentives to underreport. It's the same incentives that existed in like worker safety stuff. And if you look historically, this often drives quite a bit of local political corruption, either they're paying off a congressman, they're paying off a cop, or at the most extreme end, you are dealing with authoritarian governments which don't really care all that much, which also control pretty huge portions of the world's natural resources. And that's where I think the struggle is now. It's not that we don't know what we want to do. It is us figuring out ways to implement it and ensure that we can rely on the numbers we're getting.
Now, Asher, would you like to jump in?
I think from what they have said, all in all, e-liability is so important. But one of the aspects that I will stress on is the issues of not being tracked along the way for small manufacturing companies, or particularly maybe when you go to developing countries when the systems are not structured enough for us to track down the whole entire value chain system for production. What happens then? We're losing out from information that is useful for us to know what we cannot measure, we cannot manage. That's what we have learned in this class. So that importance for e-liability to be measured along the value chain system for production, I think is very important, and I do agree with the speakers.
Thank you. Jay.
Hello, I'm Jay Lusant, a junior studying accounting and economics. I feel like we've been focusing on the weaknesses of the e-liability system, but some of the strengths that I noticed are the auditability and the assurance part of it. It'll increase the transparency and the accountability of companies overall and their environmental status. And I just think that that's a super important way to really solidify their own claims and to help the environment as a whole in general.
How about you, Colton?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is just the lack of double counting. So
it's a strength.
It's a strength. Yeah, it's a strength. And yeah, just the fact that like one counts one and two counts two, kind of if you're looking at like scopes necessarily, and not one counting one and then two counting two and one. I think you can get into a little scary area there if you start double counting any emissions. And the possible weakness with that is which we've mentioned a little bit earlier, what Zach hit on a little bit, but just the fact that Matt, sorry, was hit it on a little bit earlier, was everyone has to do it themselves. So I think the recording is a serious issue. But I do believe that it's a less of an issue as double counting could be when measuring. So I think e-liability is a good solution.
Great answer. Deba, it's hard to be last.
Last week, I'm Niba Farhad. I'm a second year student and Masters of Global Affairs. I think overall, what all my colleagues here have said, I still feel it's a very good accounting system. It's very intuitive. And regarding like the possibility of there being fraud, that's always there even in financial accounting. But because it follows financial accounting system, so it can learn from that and we can have good auditing mechanisms over there. In fact, it's not only about financial audit here, there will be scientific audits where you are checking in like exactly if companies claiming that they have this much of emissions, there are scientific audits being done that, okay, this is exactly the kind of emissions that they have done. And it's not only accounting for those emissions, you can even for carbon claims or carbon credits, those offsets can also be claimed in here and they can be verified. So I think, and our accounting professionals, they're already familiar with the system, so it will be very easy for them to just add on to the already existing system that's already there. So I feel in that way, we are on a very good track in terms of e-liability, and it should be given a chance to be tested in the market.
I suspect that Bob Kaplan and Karthik Ramana are listening at this point, and they will be very impressed at the last point that you made, which is there's nothing new here. Yep. This is just financial accounting applied to carbon recording, to soil degradation, to whatever the topic.
I just wanted to say again that this isn't exactly new. It's just the fact that there has always been attempts to wash. The idea of like forced labor in the supply chain, for example, is a huge problem in human rights. They're still like trying to trace that and really get assurances down. It is the chronic nature of these problems across varieties of things that corporations are trying to solve that I think makes it worth hovering on for e-liability accounting, not because of it being a unique weakness, but because it is where auditing systems have tended to fail globally. And it raises really big problems where like they are difficult to address, but I think it gets us on asking the right questions to improve something that is already pretty good.
Okay, so this is not an accounting class. I think you've all realized, some of you to your surprise, that this is not an accounting class. At the same time, we're about accountability, which is different. We're about measurement, and that's been the emphasis of the whole class because of the importance of quantifying what's actually happening, which leads me to a question you have asked I ask you. E-liability accounting. It seems like a good question to end a discussion on. I think it's a question that you can turn the answer any way you want to answer. An earlier group has described what e-liability accounting is, and so the audience knows what it is. So what do you think are the strengths of this e-liability accounting, and what do you think are the possible weaknesses? Michaela.
Sure, yeah. I can start as an accounting student. I think some of the main strengths that, Professor Kaplan and Ramana have iterated in their speeches before on their theory is it really reduces the scope 3 problem that a lot of people struggle to wrap their head around. And it reduces what's called the double counting problem in scope 3 emissions, where if it's a supplier reporting on their downstream scope 3 emissions and then their buyer also reporting on their upstream scope 3 emissions, those are essentially double counted and they're aggregated into double the emissions that are actually being emitted. So the way e-liability accounting works, it was explained before, but if you're passing your emissions on and reporting that as a liability balance, it reduces that problem in being double counted. And that's just one of the strengths. I don't know.
So you as an accounting major think it's a great idea, it seems.
I do, yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. And also adding another strength is accountants know how to work debits and credits and T accounts, relating something environmental, something they're not familiar with, to a financial reporting practice that's taught basically in the first accounting class anyone has ever taken really helps bridge that gap between environmental specialists and accountants.
As I said earlier, I think Bob Kaplan and Karthik Ramana will be very happy to hear what you just said. Moving way out of accounting to global affairs. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question to me because I just finished a policy brief. I wrote a policy brief tracking Scope 3 emissions, and I focused on the e-liability as my recommendation to the SEC because one of the controversial issues with the SEC is the Scope 3 emissions, which everybody's talking about. And one of the things in which I proposed which I recommended was there should be a pilot project for the e-liability at first for the SEC to bring up, because this allows, there are over 40 pilot projects being done for the e-liability institute, but I don't think anyone has been done in the US. So I feel that should come forward. The e-liability is a very great approach from what I can see. And also, I think it also fosters innovation, because if your supplier has a high carbon emission and you are trying to get to net zero, you have to demand them to be able to bring down their emissions if you want to continue doing business with them. And that pushes them to also reduce that. And that has a ripple effect from both your upstream and also your downstream. So that my policy brief, which I'm going to be standing, because I did my internship with Deloitte, and that's proposed that. And when I came to this class and then I had the e-liability, I was like, oh, great.
Here's the answer.
Yeah, a policy brief about this.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of observations. E-liability is being introduced in the United States. There is uptake in the US. And just out of curiosity, a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from Australia. I am Australian, as you all know. A call from Australia where this perfect stranger was introducing himself to me as the e-liability person for Australia from Sydney, expecting I wouldn't know what e-liability was about, which is fair. But so it's also being introduced outside of, in the Southern Hemisphere. We know it's been introduced in Europe, of course, and in Asia. We had a good example of Tata Steel. Other thoughts, Trevor, e-liability?
One thing that strikes me, I think my classmates, especially those with more accounting background than me, have highlighted, is that it's a very easy way to step through this process of tracking emissions. So I think my classmates have very well covered that. One thing that sticks out to me is that these are current proposals going through the SEC. So if this is to take form, it will be a large process and completely changing the narrative. Scope 3 is a part of the SEC disclosure. So to totally uproot that will be a large change, but one that I think will have benefits.
I think that's absolutely true. And I should have said also, Daniel, the SEC is having very high-level conversations with both Professors Kaplan and Ramana. So this is happening. It's certainly the case. E-liability has the attention of the chairman of the SEC. No question that's the case.
And I didn't know anything about this, but I just wrote my policy brief, and I just finished last week.
Yeah. No, of course. Matt, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't want to just be repetitive, but I think for me the biggest pro, and mind you, I'm in my second year of accounting studies, so just on my very basic understanding of everything that's going on, it's the pro, in my opinion, is that it seems like there's a lot of similarities between cost accounting that we already know how to do. And so it seems that, yes, there's going to be learning barriers, of course, and obviously a lot of the problems come from, the information that we're actually reporting on and how do we report on that. But the actual accounting, we know how to do. The biggest thing for me that was just mentioned of a con of e-liability accounting is if I'm a business and I'm investing a ton of money into being carbon neutral and being sustainable, and one of my suppliers is not, and I buy their products. Now I have to take on that burden. Now, of course, on the one hand, you could say, well, find a new supplier if they're not aligning with you, but there's definitely certain cases where you need the supplier that you're supplying to make your product. Now, I say this because I don't think companies should be off scot-free. If their manufacturing plant is carbon-free or whatever, but they're making a product with parts that are not carbon-free, well, then their product technically isn't really carbon neutral. However, that's my biggest concern with it right now is how is that going to be dealt with? And is it fair for a company that's investing a lot of money in being sustainable to then lose a lot of that simply by their suppliers' choices that they really don't have a control over.
Yeah. I'd like to talk more about e-liability accounting, but you're the last group. And so I have a question that you're not prepared to answer. You haven't been prepared to answer, but I'm sure you've got an answer. Do you feel optimistic about the future? Do you feel pessimistic? Are you neutral? Are you scared? Are you excited? What is your emotion, Trevor?
I would say I feel informed, and with that comes a lot of optimism for me, especially from an engineering background. I have had technologies thrown at my faces, from wind turbines to cleaner solar panels, and while I find the intricacies and the scientific backgrounds of those very interesting, to see the business side take form and to realize that it's a necessity brings me that optimism that these two worlds can combine and will take on this problem seriously. Now, I'll also say, in reading our novels and hearing our presentations from the novels, from the other books in the course, I realize that there's also a deeper change that needs to be taken, and that is one that's more personal, a deeper commitment to living a green life. And with all this scientific and now business background, I do feel more inclined and optimistic to take that kind of more personal change.
Great answer. How about you, Sammy?
Yeah, I feel more optimistic too, because I think although ultimately it will take a lot of time for us to improve the measurement of GHG emissions, it's something that's super relevant for our generation, and even in my future career that I'll be entering after graduating, it'll be very relevant for what I'll be doing, which is audit. So I think it's something that I'm really excited to have stay informed and steer my interest in sustainability. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah, I did my internship with Deloitte, and I will also be going to Deloitte after graduating as a ESG and a sustainability analyst. For me, I think that is my own way of contributing. So I feel so energized to go into this field. I'm very optimistic about green technologies, ESG, and anything that has to do with green. So
great to hear.
Yeah, so I'm very optimistic. Yeah,
Laura.
I would say the same. I agree with Trevor. As a chemistry background, I have seen the technologies that have been used, the different research developments that have occurred over the past even decade of ways that we could get rid of climate change. But I was not aware of all the business strategies and these new things like e-liability accounting. I wasn't aware of such proposals that are helping us move forward. And I think the two worlds of accounting and science together can make a big deal rather than just them separately. So I completely agree.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic, and I think that there's not much benefit in being pessimistic, because I think when that happens, it very quickly goes to, well, what's the point? Why do I care? There's nothing that I should do because there's no hope. And I'm optimistic because of my classmates sitting around me and the discussions we've had throughout the semester. These are the people that I'm going to be working with. And we're all studying college. We don't know that much yet. We haven't had big life experiences. And the things that we've discussed and talked about, that's who's entering. We're the ones who are going to change. And so these people around me right now are why I'm optimistic about the future. We care. I think we're becoming vocal about it. We want change to happen. We're seeing change happen, and I think our generation hasn't even really reached the point to make change yet. And I'm incredibly optimistic, and I think there's a really bright future ahead, and we're all going to figure it out.
Great to hear. Michaela, you have the last word. The very last word.
I would agree. And I think I'm actually even more optimistic than I was just listening to Matt. But I will admit there is a small part of me that's fearful, and that, a lot of the books we've read do show there's two sides to this equation. Like there is a side where we can figure it out, and there absolutely is that possibility. But there is also the urgency. And so part of me is still a little bit fearful that we're not moving fast enough. And so I would use that to encourage, decision making and policy making. But overall, I would say I am optimistic. I'm definitely not pessimistic in that way you're describing, like, it's not even worth trying. But I would say I'm optimistic and I'm a little bit fearful, but in a good way that's definitely pushing me and hopefully pushing others to act now.
Wow. I mean, how things have changed. I asked the same question last year, and it was uniformly, I'd like to be optimistic, but really I'm not. And I think a lot's happened in the last 18 months. Things are starting to move. Companies are changing. We have standards being introduced. Boards are changing, and we can see it. There wasn't enough reason to be optimistic only, I'd say, 12 months ago. So it is a sort of a difference in the whole world. But anyway, thank you so much. You are the last session. I really appreciate your thoughts. To the audience, thank you for joining us. It's been great to share these thoughts of our students. I hope you've learned from them. I'm sure some of them are somewhat provocative, and I don't apologize for that. So thanks. Do not leave the conference. I'm going to return to my office and record the closing remarks, in which there are many people to thank. So please stay tuned for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you.